Alrighty, so in this video, we're going to go through and finish the setup with the ability system component. Now, I had mentioned I wanted to do some more talking in this, so I am going to. So to kind of, I guess, more or less wrap it up, if we look at the, ability system, and if we search for init, there is the init ability actor info. Now, this function here is pretty important as you'll find inside of the abilities. So inside of the abilities, you have a variable that is the current actor info. And that basically holds information such as our player controller, the avatar actor, the owning actor, and a bunch more information that we are able to just make use of when we need it. Right there inside of the abilities. We don't have to worry about trying to go through and fetch it from outside resources because this function kind of kickstarts the storing of that information. So when do we want to call this? Basically, I don't know if it actually says so inside of here, but in our case, because we are on the player state, well, the ability system's on the player state, we want to do it when the player state is it has been created and assigned to our pawn. So there's two ways we can do this. Well, more or less one way, uh, but two different ways because server and client are different. This needs to happen everywhere. So the server needs to run this ability actor info, and the client need to run it as well. So in order to make sure that the player state has been assigned server side, what we can do is we can override a function called not on possessed. Was it possessed? Yeah, possessed by. So possessed by only runs on the server, and it runs when a controller has possessed the pawn. And when a controller possesses the pawn, that means that it also has a player state associated with it because a player controller has a player state alongside it. So we're going to implement basically that init ability actor info inside of possessed by. So we're also going to do it on the client. However, this function here does not run on the client, but one that does when the player state has been received / created and all that stuff on the client, it's called onRep player state. So onRep, I mean, if you're watching this at this point, you should already know what onReps are, but this basically fires once the player state replication has been received, so to speak, on the client. So we are going to do the exact same thing and put init actor info in here and init ability actor info in here. So in both of these. And at the same time, we're going to be doing more stuff on it, later down the road, such as with the view model when we handle, creating bindings and all that stuff. So what we're going to end up doing is likely having more stuff going on that needs to happen on server and client, once the ability system is initialized, that we can have elsewhere. That we don't want to just have duplicate code, same stuff in here and same stuff in here. So we're going to create a new function that is just going to be used for initializing the ability actor info. So we're going to create a new void. Let's do initialize ability system. And we'll do it right there. So onRep player state is going to call initialize ability system. And so is possessed by. Then inside of here, we simply get the ability system component. And I'm actually going to go ahead and store it ability system component like so, just so we can more easily access it like I'd mentioned. And we want to init ability actor info. So that made us include the ability system component, which is part of the engine. So I'm going to put it down here. Okay, so with init ability actor info, it takes in two parameters, the owner actor and the avatar actor. So what the differences are between them is the avatar actor is basically the visual representation of whatever is basically, I guess you could say, controlling the ability system. So in this case, we have a pawn and a player state. The owner actor is what owns the ability system. So if we look at our player state, the player state owns the ability system. So the player state is the owner actor. The avatar actor, that little guy running around, the visual avatar, is going to be this SKG pawn. So the owner actor is going to be get player state, and the avatar actor is going to be this, our pawn. So hopefully that made sense. And that's basically all we have to actually do to set up the ability system. At this point, it is up, functional, and ready to go and be used. We just don't have anything to actually use it. So I had mentioned, I think in the first video, one of the first features we're going to be working on is going to be an interaction system. So next up, let's go ahead and quickly cover the replication modes. I've never really used anything beyond mixed, but they do have some pretty decent explanations here. So starting with minimal, this replicates the minimal gameplay effect info. And what gameplay effects are, it's kind of hard to describe in, a couple minutes, but we're going to use them, again, like with everything else, quite extensively. They're going to be used to modify our attributes, and I'll have to explain what attributes are later on as well. They're going to be used to apply and remove gameplay tags. They're going to be used to block other abilities from activating, such as, if we are jumping, we don't want to be able to sprint while we're in the air. Or if we are, I don't know, let's say if we're sprinting, we don't want to be able to shoot or something like that. And then if we're sprinting and we try to aim, we want aiming to say, cancel the sprinting ability, that kind of stuff. So a lot of that control is going to be done through applying gameplay effects, because the gameplay effects can modify the attributes, add and remove gameplay tags, and a bunch of other stuff all at the same time. And they're all entirely configurable through the editor. So they're not really something you program, they're something that a designer can go through and pretty easily tweak to get the results that you want. So if you want this to happen when this happens and block this at the same time, you do that stuff typically through the gameplay effect. So the mixed, replicates minimal gameplay info to simulated proxies, which would be, say, remote clients. So if I'm looking at you running around on my machine, you are the simulated proxy. And then full info to owners and autonomous proxies, which is basically you yourself. So if you are running around controlling your pawn, you are the autonomous proxy. You are the owner. So you get the full information replicated to you. And then full is just replicate everything to everybody. That's really what it is. Next up, more information on where we would put the ability system component. First, pawn versus player state. In our case, because we are going to be destroying our pawn, so when we go down and no one revives us and we die, our pawn is going to just get destroyed. And then it's going to end up being respawned. I had mentioned in, I think, the previous video, maybe it was before that, I can't remember. Attributes are basically our values like points, headshots, that stuff. When we destroy our pawn, if the ability system component was on that pawn, it also gets destroyed. And that's kind of a problem because when we respawn, we would lose all those values unless we wrote a system that would store those values before they're destroyed and then apply them to the ability system component again, once we've been respawned. And we don't really want to do that. The easiest way is going to be to just put it on the player state instead. Now, cases where you would want to have it on the pawn are zombies, for example. Our zombies are going to basically be a one life. There's not going to be any respawning, so to speak, of a zombie. They're just simple AI. They attack, they have speed, and they have their own health. So their health would be an attribute, their speed, potentially an attribute, that kind of stuff. And with that, because they're just dying, and then new ones are spawned the next round or during that same round, depending on what round you're on, there's no need to have any sort of persistence with the zombie's attributes. The zombie dies, that's it. he doesn't come back and need to have information. So that's the kind of the use cases between the two there. All right, so going on about 10 minutes. So that's enough yapping here. In the next video, we're going to go ahead. We can actually close the player state, I believe, and preemptively open the player controller because we're going to make use of the input delegator. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up the move and look functions on the pawn, on the delegator interface, and be passing those from the controller to the pawn via that input delegator interface that we made in, I think, the second video. So yeah, let's just make sure we can build and that we are good to go. Alrighty, so we are good to go. So I will see you in the next video.